Good day everyone, welcome to CSC 308. This is Information Assurance and Security. Today we're going to have another pre-recorded class. This is in continuation to our discussion about information security. And be sure to watch the entire video, listen and understand the lessons attentively. Right after this class, there will be a learning assessment and assignment that will be posted. So my name is Juleus, your instructor. Today we'll be talking about the need for security. And if you have any questions or clarifications regarding today's lesson, please go ahead and share it with the class. Comment your questions down to our Facebook group post, or you can send your questions to our Facebook chat groups later on. Alright, so without any further ado, let's get started. So if you can remember previously, we've talked about the critical characteristics of information, right? And then we've talked about the components of an information system. Today, we will be talking about the need for security. Why is it that information security is important? And we are going to discuss the need of information security in the perspective of businesses or organization. Okay, so we're going to discuss information security, thinking that in the point of view of the business or any organization. All right. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to understand what the businesses and organizations need for information security and identify the security requirements in protecting an organization's ability to function. All right. So this lesson will not take too long. It's just a very short discussion. Again, we're just going to talk about why information security is important in the perspective of any businesses or organization. All right. So again, the need for security. Unlike any other information technology program, the primary mission of an information security program is to ensure that systems and their contents remain the same. Organizations expends hundreds of thousands to million pesos and thousands of man-hours to maintain their information system. If threats to information and systems didn't exist, these resources could be used to improve the systems that support the information. However, attacks on information systems are a daily occurrence, and the need of information security grows along with the sophistication of such attacks. Organizations must understand the environment in which information systems operate so that their information security programs can address actual and potential problems. So this lesson describes the environment and identifies the threats it poses to organizations and their information. So technically, there are few steps, or there are a few things that businesses need to secure their ability to function or to secure their business in terms of information security. And that is protecting the organization's ability to function. That's the first step. Second step, enabling the safe operation of applications running on the organization's IT systems. And then three, protecting the data the organization collects and uses. And lastly, and perhaps one of the most important thing, is safeguarding the organization's technology assets. Okay, so we're going to talk about these four areas that businesses need to secure their information security, to secure their businesses, particularly in the information security. All right, so let's start with protecting the organization's ability to function. Implementing information security that protects the organization's ability to function is a responsibility by both the general management and the IT management, right? So although many businesses and government managers tend to be reluctant when addressing information security because they think that it is technically a complex task, since we are talking about information security here. So that's why some managers or the management, general management or general managers tend to be reluctant, tend to shy away from addressing those concerns, right? Because they think that that is a concern of an IT management, of the IT management. However, again, implementing information security that protects the organization's ability to function is both the responsibility of the general management and the IT management. Why? Okay. So imagine managing a payroll, di ba? So for example, kanang sa payroll, if magtrabaho ta, if na may trabaho. So ang payroll, the accuracy, or let's say the integrity of how the payroll is being managed is more than just the computation. Nga dapat sakto ang pagka-compute, sakto ang na-input for the computation, but it also has something to do with how the manager, or the one who is responsible for preparing the payroll, manages it, di ba? What if sayop ang ihang sayop nga input ang iyang gipambutang? So the mathematics nga involvement for the payroll depends solely on how the payroll, or the person who is working for the payroll, actually work to it, di ba? So ang pag-compute naara na ang pag-compute sa payroll is fine, but ang mas importante is how it is being computed. Sakto ba ang mga input? Sakto ba ang number of days? Sakto ba ang number of hours? Alright? So again, it is a matter on the management, not just on the computation itself. So it's the same thing with the it's the same thing with securing the organization's ability to function. So managing information security has more to do with policy and its enforcement than with the technology of this implementation. Again, protecting the organization's ability to function has something to do more with the policy and enforcement. Diba? Setting up what are the policies that will perhaps kanang maghatag og information security, and the enforcement of those policy. So this policy and the enforcement of this policy is done mostly by both the management, or general management, and the IT management. So the IT management will perhaps prepare the information security policy, and then the general management will be the one who will going to enforce its implementation. Diba? So again, protecting the organization's ability to function is both a responsibility by the organization's general management and the IT management. All right, so that is the first thing that business or organizations need: protecting the organization's ability to function. By the way, so what will happen usually if businesses are unable to function? Diba? So what are the common cause of organizations not being able to function? Diba? Aside sa technical aspect, diba? Another factor, while another factor that makes an organization's inability to function is kanang first is the physical security, di ba? If na ay mga kalamidad nga nahitabo, and then the building got distracted, di ba? And then another thing is if power loss or power outage. So those are some examples of perhaps factors why organizations may unable to function, diba? So that's just proof that it's not just about it's not just about the responsibility. It's not just for the IT management, but also for the entire general management as well. All right. So next is enabling the safe operation of application. So today's organization are under immense pressure to acquire and operate in the integrated, efficient, and capable applications. So that's why katong field health, if you can remember, or if you have heard this issue before, now field health, aside sa 15 billion or 14 billion, for nga nawala daw, aside from those, one of their issues before is that they are spending too much for Adobe Suite, di ba? And any other software that they supposed to use. Ila ko ng mga gikinahanglanon, they're spending too much. All right? So it's not just in PhilHealth, but most organizations are under the immense pressure to acquire operated, integrated, efficient, and capable applications. All right? A modern organization need to create and organizations that safeguard these application. All right. So since if you let's say for example again, feel that if they are spending millions of pesos for that particular application, so it will only make sense that they will have to make sure that those applications will be kept safe, right? Again, a modern organization needs to create an environment that safeguards these applications, particularly those that are important elements of the organization's infrastructure. It could be either operating system platforms, electronic mail or email, and instant messaging application. Organizations acquire these elements from a service provider or they build their own. But most of the time, it is being acquired from a service provider. Let's say, for example, ang bang companies that requires that uses multimedia or multimedia companies, di ba? Let's say, um, okay, just think of any multimedia companies. Most of the time, they will either develop a software for their use, or that's what they call proprietary software, or they will just buy it from a third party company, or a service provider, basically. Once an organization's infrastructure is in place, management must continue to oversee it and not relegate its management to the IT department. So again, still, and the general management is the one who should, both the general management and the IT department should be the one who are going to work in hand and protecting these application software. All right. So, how to keep these applications safe? So, here are some steps or factors that makes application secured. That keeps application secured. All right. First is authentication. Authentication procedures ensure that a user is who they say they are. This can be accomplished by requiring the user to provide a username and password when logging into an application. All right. Multi-factor authentication requires more than one form of authentication. The factors may include something you know, it could be either password, something you have, it could be a mobile device, or something you are. It could be either using thumbprint or facial recognition. So that's why it's this factor is not just for perhaps for organizations, but for us in our personal accounts or personal belongings, diba? Digital belongings. So that's why I always encourage for, especially nowadays, that Facebook and ibang social networking sites are very, let's say, hot need kon siya kayo siya kanang very puno kayo og controversy. That's why it's always make sure to keep the authentication of your mobile devices or your social networking sites kuan secured, diba? You can use two-factor authentication, diba? So those are the factors that you should that the authentication is a factor that application security should be placed. All right. So next is authorization. After a user has been authenticated, the user may be authorized to access the use of application. The system can validate that a user has permission to access the application by comparing the user's identity with a list of authorized users. Authentication must happen before authorization so that the application matches only validated user credentials to the authorized user list. Okay, so again, once a user has already been authorized to access, di ba, using the authentication, di ba, it's sakto ilahang pagbutang sa password, sakto ang authentication basically, or the system already know who the user are, di ba? they will be authorized to access depending on their authorization. So the second factor for application security is setting up authorization for each user. What do you mean by that? Let's say, for example, there are four members of a system, or four users of the system. So one could be either administrator. The administrator has the full control uh, of the entire system. Second is perhaps um, it's a user, a certain user that has certain control over everything. Kada bang dili siya tanan niya control, but there are just some parts of the system that they can control. And then um another is kanang a user na siya gamay nga control. The only thing that they can control is like input, something like that. And then another user that all they can do is just view what di sila maka modify sa system. All right. So that is the second factor for application security, is authorization, setting up what the levels of authorization for each user. Next is encryption. After a user has been authenticated and is using the application, other security measures can protect sensitive natabunan sa ako ang picture, sensitive data from being seen or even used by a cyber criminal. In cloud-based applications where traffic containing sensitive data travels between the end user and the cloud, that traffic can be encrypted to keep the data safe. Okay, so from the term suggests encryption, I know you guys already know what that means. So once a person or a user has already been authenticated and authorized to access the system, it will be best that the system is capable of encrypting those data, especially the sensitive data that the user is trying to access, especially when sending and receiving. Okay, one example is that if you have noticed, kung in mo og let's say Facebook using browser, diba? If you have noticed, if you open up Facebook, let's open it up. For example, we'll open Facebook. The first thing that you'll notice is, or perhaps you should notice this, go ahead and check the URL. You will see that it's got HTTP and an S. It's not just HTTP, but HTTPS. That is secured HTTP, or secured hypertext transfer protocol. So whenever you see a website that has HTTPS instead of HTTP, meaning they are using secured socket layer, SSL, right? And then this SSL, let's say, encrypts the data, sensitive data that are being transmitted over the internet. So that means whenever you're going to input password, credit card information, diba? The SSL, or secured socket layer, will change those whenever imong gi-input nimo ang imong credit card information or password. Makita nimo diha, sige, makita nimo ang number. However, once it's already been processed, once it's already been transmitted over the internet, the SSL will encrypt those. What do you mean by encrypt those? It will be converted to mga cipher or mga texts, diba? Any other text or words or numbers or any other characters, so that any hackers, let's say mga SQL injectors, will not be able to see those sensitive information. All right? So that is important of encryption. And then another thing is logging. If there is a security breach in an application, logging can help identify who got access to the data and how. So this is one of the most important thing to add as a feature when developing a system, is to make sure that every action is being logged by the system itself. Okay, so again, every actions that is being done by users must be logged by the system. So a good example of that is using Facebook. If you have noted, maybe some of you have noticed when you use Facebook, add mo sa inyong profile and then go to the, I think it's in their, basta na dito, and then click activity log. Let's just open it up. Okay, go to kani and then activity log. Click the activity log and you'll see all the actions that you've done on your Facebook account. Okay, so that is a very good feature to make sure that everything is being logged. In that way, whenever there is a breach, kung na ay breach na nahitabo, at least you will be able to review who logged in at that particular time and what they do. Diba? So that's it. And then lastly, application security testing, a necessary process to ensure that all of these security controls work properly. So that's why most systems na as like mga beta, um, I forgot, beta version or something like that, because it's still on the testing phase. It's always best to make sure that this application works properly before using it for, especially for the organization. All right. Okay. So that was enabling the safe operation of applications. Next, the next thing that businesses need or organization need is protecting data that organizations collect and use. All right. So without data, an organization loses its record of transactions and without data, an organization loses its record and transaction and or its ability to deliver value to its customer. Any businesses, educational institution, or government agency operating within a modern context of connected and responsive services relies on information systems. Okay, so most businesses, most organization, they are thriving for data, right? Any businesses, you name it, any organizations, they're thriving for data. They are nag-invest sila for the data. They are working for the data. Okay, that's why it's always best that those data that they're handling must be protected at all times, diba? Even when transactions are not online, information system and the data they process enable the creation and movement of goods and services. Therefore, protecting data in motion and data at rest are both critical aspects of information security. The value of data motivates attackers to steal, sabotage, or corrupt it. An effective information security program implemented by management protects the integrity and value of the organization's data. Okay, so here are some steps or tips on how to protect the organization's data. First is, banani balik-balik na lang, but here it is. Again, this is particular for protecting an organization's data. Implement a data security plan. Each organization should develop, enforce, and update a comprehensive data security plan. That plan should include an inventory of the different categories of data collected, stored, processed, or communicated by organization. Security policies and procedures for each category of data should be clear, defined, and expressed. Okay? So again, going back, katong gaina, naisgot taog about implementing security policy. That is the same thing with protecting the organization's data. That is to implement data security plan. Second, encrypt data. Alright, so diba, kabalik-balik lang. Data security plans should require a strong encryption for sensitive data. Data should be restored and communicated in encrypted form. When external parties are used for data storage purposes, the data should be encrypted before being passed to those parties. Even if they can provide encryption services, strong encryption is generally considered to include 128 and 256 bit ciphers available in the variety of forms. Okay, don't you worry about this, because perhaps soon one of our lessons is about encryption, data encryption using, say, or in other words, cipher, diba? I will talk more about encryption soon in one of our lessons. Okay. Next, Another thing in protecting organizations' data is communicate data securely. In addition to use of encryption, there are options for communicating sensitive data more securely than is possible through the use of conventional internet-based email. For example, the TOR system uses multiple computers provided by volunteers in different locations to create greater anonymity and security to email communications. Individual messages are encrypted and re-encrypted multiple times by different computers. The process of transmitting the message to its destination. All right. So again, it's for this particular step for protecting organizations' data. Again, there are different ways on encrypting. So it's about encryption, diba? Because we don't want our important files, important information to be leaked just everywhere else. We want it to be kept. So there are some services online that allows transmission of data be encrypted. Again, one of those is setting up HTTPS, making sure nga if pitan mo deploy ka og website, make sure you are hosting to a website that can provide secure socket layer or SSL, diba? To make sure that everything will be everything that is been transmitted are encrypted. Okay, and then next we have use access control and firewalls. Data security plans should require use of access controls. Those controls should include measures such as passwords, authentication requirements. It could be either challenge question or security questions to verify user identity. Maybe you've heard what is your mother's maiden name, something like that, but that's just very cliche. But anyway, challenge question is still just as useful. And biometric systems, example, fingerprint readers. Multiple authentication systems should be used. Data security policies and practices should recognize that the effectiveness of user authentication systems, such as password, is dependent on the conduct of all authorized users. For example, if a single user loses control of his or her password, the entire network of all of the data it handles are potentially compromised. Systems such as firewalls should be applied to manage access to the core data network and the internet and from the mobile devices. All right. So again, still making sure that okay, access control and firewalls. We'll talk more about it in details in on one of our lessons soon. One of our lessons soon will also talk about access control and firewalls. How do we manage it, and how do we manage it? How to manage and implement it on a computer system, basically. And then lastly, for protecting the organization's data, the use of external service providers carefully. Okay, this is very common, and perhaps pinakasayon nga buhaton is to make sure that the service providers that we are subscribed to, or inana, are those who are already proven and tested. Kumbaga, data security plans should provide policies and procedures for use of outside parties of data storage, communication, and processing functions. The plans should identify the situation under which such outside data service providers can be used and the categories of data that can be processed using those service providers. So what are these service providers, you ask? Example, we have, for example, internet. So you have to choose the internet service provider that is, capable sila. And then they've already been tested, they've already been proven. Not just, di ba? We know nga na ay bagong internet service provider ron. Na-test na ba sila? Are they proven safe? Okay, those are just the things that needs to be considered. Or ganahan ka mo stay sa daan medyo hinay, pero you know that they're reliable. It will be totally up to you. Okay, next, another example is electricity. Although here in Negros Oriental, we only have one electric company, at least, di ba? Ang Noreco, so we don't not really have that option, other option, rather than just selecting Noreco as the electricity. But for most countries, most cities, especially in the developed countries, they have multiple electric companies, so they tend to choose which electric provider or electric service provider they will choose. The one that they already know the lang reliability and integrity, right? And then another thing is for the calls, messages, diba? Emails, so on and so forth. All right. So that was protecting an organization's data. Next is safeguarding technology assets in an organizations, and perhaps this is one of the most important thing because all of those steps, all of those needs that we just talked about a while ago will be in vain if the all the technology assets in the an organization is damaged or compromised, diba? So when we say safeguarding technology assets in organization, making sure that all of the technology assets, computers, servers, database, and the physical, tanan-tanan sa organization is kept safe. There are different there are different factors that are in hand for protecting the entire technology assets of organization, but we're just going to talk about some of the few. Okay, so first is identify critical systems and sensitive information. So an example of critical systems might be, okay, critical systems are those systems or system components, it could be either hardware or software, that if lost or compromised would jeopardize the ability of the system to continue processing. An example of that is the cabling that links your administrative and instructional computer network. Di ba? So, critical systems, let's say, ang network, ang, ang hub na guba. Alright? So, you won't be able to connect or link your, again, administrative PC to or server perhaps to the instructional or the client computer network. Okay? So, di ba? Kung wala internet, connect sa mga computers, then the system's ability to process or to work will be jeopardized. So imagine if you can remember katong inyong experiences sa mag-enroll, magpa-enroll sa NORSU Bais back when we're still doing our face-to-face classes. Di ba? So all of the computers, ang mga computers gamit for encoding or for the enrollment are connected on a network. So imagine if, and then there is a specific server katong na usually sa CAS5 nga dito, si Sir Saldo to usually sa una. Imagine if kana nga server ma-disconnect siya sa mga PC nga nagigamit sa mga encoder, we won't be able to continue the encoding, di ba? We won't be able to continue the enrollment. It's because the link between the admin and the server is broken. So everything that we'll do in the client's end o katong mga encoder, delete na siya mo send sa administrators or the servers computer. So dili ma-save ang mga gina-encode, meaning dili mo continue. Alright? So again, that is the critical systems. And then sensitive information is that information which, if lost or compromised, might negatively affect the owner of the information or require substantial resource to recreate. This is very common, especially kanang mga BPO or let's say mga companies or organization that handles information, sensitive information from the people, 'di ba? So let's say for example, sa banking institutions like BPO, BPI inana. So you are member ka ni nakay account sa let's say BPI or just any bank na lang. Just any bank, and then for some reason they have na napagawas nila basically your banking information is your sensitive information stored in BPI. Now, if BPI will release those information to public, it could be either intentionally or unintentionally. So it will compromise makompromise ang imuhang financial, financial. I'm not sure what they call this, but you will be jeopardized or it will affect to you financially, diba? Because let's say for example your credit card information was kana na leak, diba? You will be jeopardized, you will be at risk financially, diba? So again, the first thing is to identify critical and sensitive information. Why? Because next, estimate the value of system components. Estimating the value of your information system is not always simple, but the task is made more manageable by focusing on the word estimate. After all, it may very well be impossible, or at least impractical, to try to derive a precise peso value for some assets, especially information assets. Instead, try to calculate a reasonable approximation of the replacement value of each component of the system before equipment and information, both equipment and information. Okay, so again, what you already have sa organization may not be, dili na siya makwenta dayon, di na siya makwenta ba? For example, you already have computers, di na mo kwenta pila ito yung nagastoan ng computer tananaw. You're going to count, you're going to compute if imo siyang islan. So for example, mga computers nga guba, how much will it cost if you're going to replace this? So that is how you're going to compute the value or estimate the value of the system's components. So that is another thing to keep the technology assets of organization safe is to make sure that you already know the value or you've already estimated the value of the system components. So that's why if makabantay mo sa mga balita na nasunog, mabalaan nila ang pila ang danyos. So, money 5 million pesos ang danyos because they already prepared a plan or they've already prepared or estimated the value of the components. So again, you're not going to compute og pilay value sa mga equipment nga naa nimo because by that time magkawala man na magka-less man ang value over time, di ba? For especially for things like this, like computers, once you've already used it, it loses its value over time. So if yung nakuntahon ron mugamay ang value, what you're going to do is you're going to compute the value of the replacements. So if naguba yung computer, you're going to compute you're going to estimate the value by knowing how much the replacement of the computer will cost. Diba? That's it. And the next is identify threats. Aside from the prevalence of computer virus threats, system damages can be caused by an intentional employee action or negligence. Any such action, or even that contributes to risk, is referred to as threat. So threats may include natural threats. So when you say natural threats, it could be either lightning, tornado, hurricane, flood, earthquake, snow or ice storm, forest fire, humidity, high temperatures, dirt or water damage, and then time or meaning nagkagulang or aging media nagkadaan. Right? So those are natural threats. Another threat is unintentional threats. Unintentional. It could be either equipment failure, power fluctuations, magnetic fields, spilled beverages, user error, air conditioning ducts, computer viruses, heating units, programmer error, lost documentation, lost encryption keys, aging facilities. Alright, so those are unintentional threats. Mga threats nga wala natuyo. And then intentional human threats includes theft, vandalism, arson, hacking, file sabotage, wiretaps, computer viruses, unauthorized copying, and disclosure of information. So, as an organization, you have to keep up what are the threats inside the organizations. Okay. Next is identify vulnerabilities. So, if gain a vulnerability, if gain a threats, things that already been that has already happened and may happen. Vulnerabilities refers to points within a system that are open to attack or damage. Specifically, they are the mechanisms in which threats access your system. Okay, again, threats are the possible things that will happen and may have already happened. Vulnerability are the when say vulnerability is the factors within the system that can cause threats. Diba? So example, think of a thief, or which is a threat, diba? Who is ready to strike your building, which is your house or assets. Diba? So that is an open back window through which the thief might enter the premises is a vulnerability. Okay? So again, sa imong balay, so ang kawatan mo na siya threat, ang imuhang window nga naguba is the vulnerability because thief, which is the threat, can easily hack into or attack your house, di ba? Because of the broken window. So to keep keeping one thing about keeping the technology asset is to make sure that you've already identified the vulnerabilities within the organization. So another example of vulnerabilities or the typical office vulnerabilities is a door is propped open and doesn't have a lock, diba? Unlocked doors. A cup of coffee is set on a computer case, diba? If naa kay kape, gipatong nimo sa computer, that is already a vulnerability because the cup of coffee might trip over and then the contents will spill on the computer. Thus, it will be it will be a problem because the computer may not work and all the information or the files, the data are stored in that computer. Another thing, a computer monitor sits within plain sight and is easy to reach a window. All right, especially kanang mga companies or organization that caters to the public. So make sure that the computer is out of reach from the window so that di ba walay tao dili nya abre ang bintana dili kaya pud makuha. Another thing, wiring is in the way of foot traffic. Equipment is plugged into wall sockets without surge protector. Outlets are overloaded. Backup files are stored in the same room as the original files. And then disks are not labeled. Okay, someone's password is written and posted on the monitor. A computer is logged on and has been left unattended. Okay, so this is why whenever mo siyang practice na ako nga every time nga, especially right now I'm working here in NORSU Bais and I'm using my laptop. So whenever I have to leave my workstation, I always lock my computer. Diba? Dali rang pag-lock, Windows L na lang nimo. Windows L, it will lock your computer so that nobody will be able to use it. Diba? Mo enter pa kog password o sa siya mo may use balik. Alright, so those are just some of the vulnerabilities. And then next is identify countermeasures against the threats and vulnerabilities. Now, you already know what are the threats. You've already come up with the list of the threats and the list of vulnerabilities within the system or within the organization. The next step parallels to the step 3 and 4, which is identifying the threats and vulnerabilities. And then that is purpose is to generate an exhaustive list of ideas, this time potential solutions to the concerns raised by your identified threats and vulnerabilities. Diba? When considering options, be sure to keep in mind that many threats and vulnerabilities can be addressed by more than one countermeasure. Alright, so depending on what are the threats and vulnerabilities that you've already listed down, alright, you've already identified, you have to prepare how you're going to countermeasure the threats and vulnerabilities. Diba? Again, one example is, kung guba ang bintana, then dapat ayuhon ng bintana. Simple as that. And then lastly, estimate the cost of implementing countermeasures. So a while ago, we've talked about estimating the cost or the value of the system equipments. This time, you have to estimate the cost of implementing the countermeasures. So this step entails determining the cost associated with countermeasures identified in step 5. Kani. Be certain to consider all of the following factors, both money and time for research, development, procurement, installation, maintenance, and security features, altered productivity, and staff training time. Alright? So these are, and that will be the last of it. So these are the reason why information security is important, especially in the perspective of businesses or organizations. So it's very important to make sure that all the assets inside of organization or businesses must be kept safe at all times, diba? To make sure that that organization or businesses will continue to work, will continue to kanang mo function, diba? And again, if you just to review, the first thing that you'll be needing is the protection of the organization's ability to function. That's the first step. Enabling the safe operation of its application running on the organization's IT system, protecting the data and the organization's collect and uses, and lastly, safeguarding the organization technology assets. All right. So that will be the end of it. Thanks so much for making this far in the video. I know it's been, I promise, nga dali na siya, but it turned out to be a little bit longer than I've expected. But if you have any questions or clarifications, please send in your questions through our Facebook group post, or you can comment it right there, or you can send it through our Facebook chat groups. Okay? So to assess your learning from this orientation, kindly fill up this form. I'm going to post a copy or a link later on, but this link will not be open. Okay, again, this link will not be open unless this video gets a few 100% views. That means at least just pila ra ka buok nga makatanaw from start to end. I'm going to open the link for you guys. And the deadline would be Friday, June 4th, 2021 at 11:59 p.m. And as for your assignment, please go ahead and check our Facebook or our Google Classroom any day now, or any day now. I'm going to upload it so that you'll be able to prepare yourselves for the assignment. Okay, so again, that will be the end for today. Here are the reference for our today's lesson, and please keep yourself safe. God bless us all.